Just leaving it off because I never turned the mic on the last time, so it's a mute video. I never just pressed the button on the mic. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, at least I'm making sound now. Okay, so let's see. I think I may as well just fill some of the gaps up on this side anyway. And then I'll go to do something in the area of the eye particularly, and bring this eye up maybe into a bit more detail. Just use some of the red now as well. I think I'll go for the cadmium red and a little bit of the alizarin, just to put something kind of in there. Let's see. I felt like there wasn't enough pigment on it to spread it around, and I wanted to put a touch of blue into it as well to just make it a little less bright red. Oh, there he goes. Gee. Okay, and then there'll be a little touch of the t-shirt on that side as well, of course, somewhere there. It's quite nice, that alizarin colour. I think it's maybe a little bit more alizarinish down there at the front. And with him being seated, like, did you see Suzanne's amazing? Do you mind if I hold this up? I didn't wait for an answer, did I? Did you see the way she's managed to get the whole body in there with the arms are beautifully, you've got the seated figure. It's brilliant. And I'm trying to get the gesture of that seated a little bit here as well, you know, the way the body will be coming forward a little bit. And I thought it was maybe a little bit closer to alizarin, that kind of colour there. And of course you could always make an edge to it, but I think I'm just going to tone too much there, and I want to go back up to the face. So I put a little bit of the sap green into it. So that's very running all together. Put the sap green, I think, into the alizarin crimson. So give me a colour that will further deepen the tones around here. Just something to kind of give a bit more form to that side of the head. There, and then there's the skin here too, isn't there? Just kind of finding my way back in, and then I'll focus. I think I will just go into the eye now, actually. I never did timekeeping or anything. Lily, will you do 20 minutes from now? Yeah. Or maybe 15 minutes from now, actually. Thanks. Okay. So I often say, like, as you're working on the painting, you kind of want to bring it all up together and keep attention on a little bit on everything. But for the purposes of the demonstration, I am going to work only on one eye, just to kind of give a little bit more detail, or some pointers as to what I find helpful when painting an eye. So I'm going to just try first to find the landscape within which the eye sits with a little bit more clarity. So again, I think the sap green and the alizarin crimson are good colours to make a dark, to get the shadow that nestles in there. So the green and the sap green and the alizarin crimson. Might put a touch of ultramarine blue in there as well, actually. And I want a consistency that's allowing the brush stays together at the end, so it's wet enough for that, but it's not so wet that there's a pool down here. And then I'm scooping it up, and let's see now, where do I want to put that? Yeah, so I think there's a kind of a triangle of dark somewhere here. If you have a triangle, this is quite a dark colour now, so, you know, when I put it on, I'm going to probably end up just using that as a, you know, to pull it out a little bit. But let's see, I dipped it into the water as I was coming up there, actually. So this is going to be lighter now again. So let's see. Let's have a look at it. Yeah, I think I want to spread it out into that kind of triangle-ish kind of shape. That's very wet. Okay, so there's something of a dark shadow there. And there'll be two directions. Will that just hit there? I think I just hit it on the way back. Don't be a mistake. Okay. So there'll be two directions to the eyebrow. Even although they're not so visible, you can still kind of, you know there's one going this way, and you can assume that there's the line going that way too. And so it kind of helps just to have the idea of the form of that in your head, like. So finding that direction, and then I'm looking at the line of the eyelash. So the eyelid, really, where the eyelid meets the socket of the eye. I'm going to see if I can print that line, and it looks to me like it would kind of cut through the bit of the eyebrow that I've just painted. So these are the things that I think are helpful to pull out when you're painting an eye. The first thing would be the two directions of the eyebrow, where you can see them. And then the next thing would be the line of where the eyelid stops and where the eye socket begins. So the top line there. And then there's a bit of shadow that kind of hugs the eyeball underneath. Here, like, I think there's some sort of shadow here that's kind of hugging the shape of the eyeball. And they make a little bit more of the red and green next to do that colour there. I'm just going to take up the drip as well. I don't really want it to be that wet. And I find here that it can be helpful to, like, just to push and lift so that you're finding the upper surface of the lower lid. When you lift, you can feel like there's the upper surface of the lower lid that's a little bit lighter, and then you've got the dark of the iris behind that. It's helpful if you can to see that shelf of light on the upper surface of the lower lid. We'll see it a bit more clearly later on. And then there's a second line that's almost parallel to this first one where the eyelashes sit. So let's see now. Yes, we'll do that second line, sure. It's kind of there-ish, I suppose. And from that line then you could maybe go down to the smaller brush. And if you don't have these brushes, let me know, I can find some for you. I'm going to use the smaller brush to explain where the iris kind of drops down from the upper lid. I'm going to use a little bit of alizarin crimson. I think that might be an Indian Anthurian actually that I'm putting in, pretending it's not alizarin but ultramarine. Anyway, a dark blue. That's what I'm using. And I'm going to push and lift so that where the iris is will be covered a bit by the upper lid. And I'm going to see where the iris sits in relation to the eyebrow and in relation to the little bit of white in the corner of the eye, how far over the iris will be, you know. So I'm going to push and lift there, just indicating for a start anyway. And you might need to look at your eye might need to look a bit strange for a while when you start to paint it in, until you kind of figure out where it is. But most of the top of the iris is overlapped, isn't it, by the eyelid. So you can kind of see that it's going to be opening up towards the lid. Now just find some more of that blue on the other side. Sometimes you kind of make the eye circular and it looks a bit starey, and actually there's a lot of lid covering the eye here. It's almost halfway down. Especially after lunch, you're kind of even sleepier. It's an awful time for a model to be having to sit for an eye demonstration. I'm just going to push that up a little bit more here. I know there's a bit of white there, but I'm going to risk losing the white just to kind of get the general shape of the iris. And after it dries, you can kind of carve it a little bit more to create more of a circular shape there to the bottom of it. And then I'm going to see about maybe putting some more colour into the area around the eye. And maybe the eyelid itself could be warmer, a little warmth into that. and I can kind of curve around with a bit of shadow. And maybe, you know, back here as well, it could be quite, I think when I half close my eyes, really, all of this area is fairly dark. And even the white of the eye won't really read as being white. I often use a bit of cerulean blue for the white of the eye, just to have something in there that isn't the same colour as the skin, but isn't the white paper either. So I could maybe put some of that blue in here. And then shave off a little bit of the iris at the same time. And the other side too. Okay. And I think, you know, with an eye you can get away with doing very little. As soon as you feel like it reads as an eye, you can just leave the blessed thing alone then. You know, you don't have to be trying to get every last detail of it, I think. Okay. So there's a little bit of orangement in there, and sure, I think I could use it here. It's good, I think, in the area of the eye, it helps to distinguish parts from each other by using colours rather than tone. You can use tone as well, of course, but I think often colour is a good way to distinguish one part from another. And then, of course, you could see where else you could put that colour that you were just using. Not really looking at what I'm doing at all. Let's see now. Okay, I wanted to curve away here, so I'm going to lift that little bit, and this I'm going to maybe there could be something a touch darker on the inner corner of the eye. I'm going to use some of the blue and brown mixed together then to make something very dark, just to drop it in for the pupil. Even although I can't really see great detail in there, I think it helps to have something a bit darker in the eye. And like it could be just the shadow that's cast by the eyelid onto the iris itself, that could be the dark. So I might try that first. So I'm going to push and lift with this. This is a blue and brown mixed together, and they make quite a dark colour, a bit like Payne's grey maybe. So I'm going to push and lift, and then maybe let a little bit of something dark come down for where the pupil might be located. And it's quite dark that, but I think it'll be okay. Even just put something darker now in the eyebrow as well. As soon as you bring something kind of that deep in tone into the iris, you could maybe use something equally dark or almost as dark in the eyebrow. Okay. Deepen the tone of that a little bit more here as well, I think. And then there'll be some of the same kind of tones elsewhere in the painting that you can pick up on. If you do something dark in one area, it kind of gives you a bit of a license to do it somewhere else as well, like in another couple of places. So I was thinking there underneath the ear and maybe around the eye, we'll just soften the top of that a bit so it's not quite so severe. And after the iris is dried, if you want to lift out a little bit more light, you could always go back in and kind of retrieve the light there with a dry brush. You know, you could excavate out a little bit more of the light and carve into it a bit more. But I think that's generally the kind of things I'd recommend with regard to the eye. And then we put the bit of a shadow here. And you could emphasize the same dark elsewhere too, like I was saying in the nose. You could just re-establish the nostril to make it a little bit darker maybe. And there might be something equally dark happen over here. And you might want to do something fairly, broad then again with the big brush. You know, it might be quite nice to release any sort of tension that was involved in that. Being careful. I don't know how careful I was being there actually. I hope it's alright here. That's anyway. But if you feel like you were kind of really focusing on it, it's quite nice then to do something that has a bit more impact somewhere else again. There's something about that thing of like spiraling in, focus, and then spiraling out. Hey, in and out. And I think that way is important. Without that, it becomes all kind of, you know, there's a bit of that. So there's something about the inhale, exhale, carry on. It's lovely. And you know, my focus wasn't brilliant there now for the eye, but that's mostly what I wanted to say. Just the two directions of the eyebrow, something for the upper lid that's covering the iris, and knowing, thanks very much Pete, sorry, and knowing that there's a little shelf between the iris and the shadow that sits underneath the eye there. There's a shelf that catches the light, and I think that gives the feeling of depth in the eye area. And sometimes you'll find there's a shadow overhanging from the eyelid onto the iris. I can see it in your eyes, John. A shadow of blue, dark blue, kind of hanging over at the top. So it shows again a bit of depth. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Try it out. And of course it'll be different in every angle. It'll be different, from, you know. But these are the things that I think it's worth looking for, no matter where you're looking at the eye from. Look at the shape of the skin between the eyelid and the eyebrow, rather than feel like you're having to paint an eye, which is kind of daunting. And of course you have to paint too. I just had to do the ones that doesn't really. Okay, all the best.